I'm back! I made it back successfully around the world. Now that is quite the experience. I went around the world from Tucson to, I took a shuttle bus, Groom Transportation, not a bad service. From using Groom, I took it to the Phoenix International Airport, Sky Harbor International Airport, and then I planned on flying to Calgary and then London. Well, my flight was delayed. And that was actually a good thing. Usually delays are bad things, but this delay, unlike another one I'll talk about in a minute, was a good thing. The reason why it was a good thing is my flight originally was supposed to leave at noon, fly to Calgary, have about 3 or 4 hour, maybe 5 hour layover, get into London about noon. Well, because the flight was delayed, it was going to make it so I couldn't catch my connecting flight. So, because it was very delayed, so they put me on another flight out of Phoenix on American Airlines. Now the original flight was WestJet. They bumped me over, put me on a different airline. American Airlines directly to London got me in 2 hours early. That doesn't usually happen. Now, I don't usually recommend a 10 o'clock arrival, but that's because if I were to stay in London, I would have had to wait several hours until I could have gotten into my hotel. Well, I was lucky in this case because I needed to take a train to Wales to visit my daughter, Ivory. And that was a great part of the trip. I will have, for every part of this trip, there will be videos, probably multiple, so stay tuned. Anyways, so that wasn't so bad. I got to her about 4 o'clock in the evening because I had to get downtown, find my way to I had to take a train to Paddington. I took the Elizabeth line, which was nice. It's a brand new line that opened up in June of 2022. I took this trip in January of 2023. I got to Paddington Station. I had to adjust my tickets, which I had pre-booked. I had to pay about £10 extra to change my ticket to an earlier one. And it was a good thing, excuse me, because there had been a lot of flooding in the Bath, Bristol area. There'd been non-stop rain in the area for 2 whole weeks. The day I got there was the first day it was actually sunny for 2 weeks in the United Kingdom. That's not always unusual. Anyway, I got to her, and then I spent the weekend with them before Will, her boyfriend, drove me back to London. He had a meeting the next day, so he had to get to his hotel. Anyway, he dropped me off, and I spent the night, and then I walked over to Heathrow, because there was a long bridge that takes you to Terminal 4 from the Premier Inn I stayed in, which I like the Premier Inn. It's not super expensive, but it is comfortable. They have plenty of service. There's a restaurant on site, a place to buy snacks, whatever you need. It's a nice hotel for the price. So I caught Brussels Airline, and that was on Monday the 20th. Am I right? That's wrong. Monday the 16th of January. Brussels Airline, I had never heard of. Obviously a low-cost carrier. Well, they left late, and I had a short window for a layover in Brussels, Belgium. So left almost an hour late, got me there just short of the time. I mean, I walked up to the gate and they had closed it right in front of me, would not let me get on the plane, and they made me have a delay for 4 hours getting to Israel. That was supposed to be a direct flight from Belgium to Israel, which I thought was great. Delays of 4 hours are never fun. Nobody likes a delay. But on a trip like this, it was the only one. So I can't complain. One out of multiple airline flights, and I got delayed one time. So they flew me on Lufthansa out of Belgium to Frankfurt, and then through Frankfurt to Israel. Got me there 4 hours late. Now, I don't mind getting in the evening, usually, but it's a whole new country. I wanted a little bit of daylight if I could have had it, so I could have gotten a little more lay of the land. What happened, I got there thinking I could use a credit card to get into a cab. I couldn't find a cab that would take one, and then the other option is to catch, one of their trams. Well, you needed a special card, the RAV-DAV card, which I'll talk about later, and that would have meant I had to pass back through security. My Airbnb was about a mile away, so I decided, well, you know what, I'm just going to walk it. There's just some things, especially as tired as I was at the time with all the delays that day, I just want to get to my Airbnb and start to get a little bit of rest before I had an early tour the next morning to Mount Masada and the Dead Sea, which you could probably watch that video right here. So I point there. Watch, I probably don't even know how to add that. I digress. You can watch it. Watch towards the end. I'll have a link so you can watch that video. By the way, while we're watching, you can like or subscribe. Actually, do both. Why not? This is a lot of fun, right? Okay. So, my stay in Israel was great. You'll get to see videos on that too. But I flew early out of Israel to Dubai. I had to be there by 8 a.m. My flight was at 8 a.m. I needed to be to the airport by 6 a.m. So I woke up at 3 a.m. just so I could get through all these kind of barriers that I knew I was going to get at the Israel airport. The Israel airport is not as difficult with security in mind coming in, but it is difficult going out. They stood there for a long time staring at me when they're looking at my passport and seeing if I'm who's on the passport. Now I do understand wearing the beard kind of long, so I do get it, but they look at me, talk to somebody in Hebrew, or I think it's Hebrew, and I couldn't understand anything. So I'm just standing there like I'm some weird criminal. At least I felt like they looked at me like I was a criminal at that point. But I was like, this is the only way I'm getting out of the country, so I'll go through the process like I need to do. No sense in complaining because you don't control those processes. Excuse me. So you don't control the process. You've just got to be patient and let them go through it and answer any question that they ask you honestly. I think they went through 3 or 4 different supervisors to come and look at my passport. A lot of people have that same problem. When I was going through the line and watching the people in front of me, I'd say it was every other person that they were taking that much time. And it was 15 minutes or more, maybe 20 minutes, just of checking my passport. Just that process. Then trying to get in line and getting they won't give you your boarding pass until you're through that process. So, and that takes a while because then you get in line and there's so many people in front of you. And from my perspective, this is not a society that is very impressed with the concept of staying in a queue in order the way you do. Some people walk right straight in front of you. You can be grumpy about it, or you could just be like, well, I'll just have to wait just a little bit longer. It didn't prevent me from getting on my flight in an orderly fashion. So, don't get upset about it. Just roll with the punches. That's the way it is in any culture. You've got to roll with their traditions, not your own. Your expectations need to be put on the back shelf and go through whatever they're doing. Because if you're going to complain, you're going to be that ugly American that everybody complains about. Don't be that person. Be the person that's patient, allows things to come to you, and then you get less scrutiny and less of a hard time. All right, I went off and I sermonized. You weren't asking for a preacher on that one. I gave it to you anyways. Consider that another lesson I gave for free. Flying to Dubai was great. We left at 8 a.m. We got in at, I think, about 1 p.m. My hotel said that check-in wasn't until 4. I went there anyway, so I got there, and my hotel was fantastic. And I'm going to talk about them in another video because they were so good, especially the kitchen staff, the people down in the restaurant. What a nice group. When I got in, I was way early. Person said, no problem, big smile, and then handed me my keys. I went straight up and I took a nap because I was tired. But I had an appointment that evening, and you'll get to see more of that. I went to the Museum of the Future, which was awesome. I went back to my hotel, ate dinner. Nice people served me. They were really patient. What a great group of people in that spot. Rove City Center Hotel. You are top notch, by the way, for your price and the service. I mean, every time I go there, I'm going to try to stay there because I loved it so much. You made my experience great. All right. After Dubai, well, not after Dubai, when I was leaving Dubai, I went back to the airport. I had an 8 o'clock flight. I tried to be there about 3 hours early. I was there a little earlier than that. They weren't going to let me through, but I was trying to get to my lounge. I reserved a lounge that evening. Checkout at the hotel was 2. My flight wasn't until 8. So I left at 2. Actually, no, I was there 5 hours early. They wouldn't let me through until there was 3.5 hours before my flight. So I just sat and waited. I had reserved a lounge. I went to that lounge. It wasn't the best lounge I've been to. The Maharba, I think it's the Maharba Lounge. But they did serve food. It was healthy food. The workers were nice, although there wasn't, I think, there probably wasn't enough workers for all the things all the tasks that they have and how much they were trying to service, and they were working really hard. So I do not blame them at all. I just know it was hard work. But got a huge bottle of water. I was well hydrated. Then I went down to my check-in, and this was on Indigo Airlines. Oh, I don't know if I mentioned, the flight to Dubai is rare, and that was fine. It was an older aircraft, but it was, I mean, well ran. It was great. No problems. Just everything was good with them. The flight from Dubai to Singapore is Indigo Airlines. Now, I'm not sure these are the same airlines I'll use next year when I go the opposite direction. We'll talk about that at the end. So this was an overnight flight, 8 o'clock in the morning, not arriving in Singapore until, I believe it was 10 a.m. Yeah, I think it was 10 a.m. But there's a 4-hour time difference here, too. So it's like going from coast to coast in the United States on that trip, that section of the trip. The layover I had, so 8 o'clock, we get into Chennai, India at 1:30 in the morning. This airport was very just run down. I don't know why. I don't understand. There's probably a lot of questions I would have. I'm not an expert. I'm just saying, you know, I expected a little bit more. Oh, great little story going through Chennai. So I made it through security. You know, I go up this one long escalator, walk across the floor, down to this other escalator that takes me just as far back down. And as I'm going down, I could look up and there's this window. And these two guys from India look down on me and they're like, smiling at me and waving. And I laughed. I thought it was the most hysterical thing ever, and I waved back. I think the reason that happened was I think I might have been the only white person in the airport at that time of the morning. I definitely was a minority. I thought, well, that's nice. They waved at me. It was great. Dry throat because I'm talking too much. All right. I get into Singapore about 10 a.m. Everything went smoothly on Indigo. It was fine. It's a good airline. I think it's well worth flying on if you can, if you need to, if it's the most affordable way to get between Dubai and Singapore. Whichever is the best, most affordable way that gets you there in a decent time, take the airline. There's nothing wrong with the airline. It runs and functions just fine. So get to Singapore. I got there a bit early. Got to my pod hotel, which wasn't horrible. It wasn't horrible. Oh, somebody's texting me. Forget them. It wasn't horrible. It wasn't fantastic either. I think maybe I'm just past my pod hotel days. I like a hotel that gives me some privacy and place to sleep without me being concerned for all my stuff. The lockers there at that hotel were not especially great. You couldn't use them, so your luggage was out in the open. Now, little key for pod hotel, and I may include the footage in this. Little key for staying in a pod hotel. Stay in a mixed dormitory if possible. The reason I say that is because when you're staying with guys, a lot of times men, boys, whatever, when they're staying together, they're louder, they're a little more disruptive, they less respectful. Of course, I was that age before too, and that's what the majority of people who stay in these places are probably in their 20s. So when you stay in a mixed sex section, the guys are quieter. The girls are quiet, the guys are quiet, you get a bit more peace. And so people are just a bit more respectful when you're in a mixed dormitory. Not that I'm ever doing it again. I don't think that's ever happening again. Although it did save me a ton of money. And not just by switching to Geico. Alright. Flying out of Singapore. By the way, my friend Bernard treated me like a king while I was there. What a great guy. I cannot mention how awesome he was. Bernard, I appreciate you. Thank you so much for the time you showed me in Singapore. The guy spent hours just showing me the town, and I appreciate it. Alright, I flew on Zip Air out of Singapore. It was a midnight flight to get me to Japan. Now, this is where I'm going to talk about this. The next time when I take people on this trip next year, I guess I'll call it the second annual Around the World Adventure Tour. When I take it next year, I am not going the direction I went this year. I'm going the opposite way. Because of this reason, when you are going east, the sun is constantly coming at you. That means you're losing hours as you go. So if you switch time zones, that time zone's always going to be ahead of you. So say you get there at 8 p.m., or say you left at 8 p.m., and you flew 2 hours, and it's 10 p.m. where you were, but you might have missed 2 time zones, so it's midnight where you're flying. You're constantly losing 2 hours, or however many hours you're jumping. So when I flew from Dubai to India, I lost 4 hours, and it was overnight, and I was exhausted. I had too many of these overnight red-eye type flights. So next year, I'm going to fly the opposite direction so that I'm getting in the evening. Now, or the afternoon. Afternoon or evening is great. Get there about the time you can check into your hotel. So you can relax, get adjusted, go eat, then maybe see something in the evening, and then go to bed. You might get to see something, maybe not, but at least that travel day you can experience some restfulness. If you are flying overnight flights, red-eye flights, the opposite direction, you're missing out on important sleep that is important for you to be an energetic adventurer, a travel hero like myself. It is hard to recoup the energy that you lose by flying on a plane during your sleeping hours. You can avoid it when you're going over the oceans, like the Pacific and the Atlantic, because those are many hours over the sea and it's going to take a little while, and so the best time to do that is at night. But when you are flying west, so say you're flying I go out of Tucson, that's where I'm from. So say I fly out of Tucson and I go west to Japan. Hold on. I'm going, all right. Say I'm going out of Tucson, I'm flying west to Japan. I can leave early in the morning and I'll get into Japan, say late afternoon, early evening. I'll get through customs. And by the way, customs in Japan is hard right now. And you have to wear your mask. And that's their prerogative, it's their stuff. Just makes it more difficult on that trip. All right. So every time you move with the sun, you typically stay within the day that you took off. Now, you do cross the international date line. That's true. You cross the international date line, and that means you get there the next day, but you will have felt like it was in the same day. Staying within the same day on flights means you get in the afternoon and the evening, and you have that time for restfulness. Going the opposite direction, going to the east, you're constantly going to be fighting against the sun. So, lesson to you. As often as possible, except for say when you're flying to Europe for a trip that stays in Europe, go towards the sun. Just go the way the sun, don't go towards the sun, go with the sun. That's a good travel tip. Go with the sun. All right, back to the last couple flights. Zip Air to Tokyo was overnight. Got in about 10 a.m. Got in at 8 a.m. Took me 2 hours to get through customs. Then another 2 hours to get into town and into Tokyo and get to my hotel. Then I still had a 2-hour wait for me to check in. So I'm in the lobby for 2 hours. That's just the difficulty. You're already tired from being overnight. You're already tired from flying overnight. That just doesn't work out energy-wise. You want to keep your energy up as much as you can. You're going to be tired because you're on a trip, but if you can keep your energy up and feel as normal as possible the whole time, then go the direction the sun goes on a around the world flight. All right, so from Tokyo to home, I flew American Airlines across to Los Angeles. That flight went off without a hitch. It was great, smooth. Yeah, it was overnight in a way. It was weird because it took off at 2, no, it was 1 o'clock in the afternoon in Tokyo. I landed in, and that was on the 29th of January. And then I landed in LAX at 6 a.m. on the 29th. So I landed 7 hours earlier than I took off, according to the time, but that's according to the time zones. And crossing the international date line meant we stayed in the same day. I know it sounds difficult, but it's kind of fun, it's kind of cool, and it's another notch on your traveler's belt. When I got to Los Angeles, I was ready to fly out about 3 hours after I got in. That flight got delayed for another 2 hours, so I didn't get home. I flew Delta from LAX to Tucson. End of story. Now, I guess I was delayed twice on all my flights, and that's fine. That's kind of normal for a trip like this. I wouldn't be surprised if we took a trip next year and we got delayed 2 times. Flight delays are a thing, and you can't control them. You just hope that it doesn't ruin connections, and it only kind of ruined connections one time for me. So not a big deal. Still a pain, especially when you're tired. And especially at the end of the trip, everybody's tired. You're ready to get home. You want to relax, and you can't get there fast enough. All right. Now, to say this last thing I'm saying today before I sign off. So, a great adventure, so much fun. This was, a lot of people look at it, Kelly, you have the greatest job in the world. And yes, in a way I do. But I didn't take this trip just so I could have this notch on my belt. That's part of it. I've been around the world now. That's great. But I took this trip so I could be informed about what you guys need when you take a trip with me. I want you to benefit from my experience. I took that so that I could take a bunch of people around the world to live out their dreams and to do it more smoothly than I did it. I put myself in certain circumstances so that you don't have to next year. And I learned a lot while I was doing it. And that is part of the personalized service that you get when you go through me, Kelly Houck at Nerdgasmic Adventures. Now, let me be your travel hero. Also, like I said, like and subscribe. I'm pretty sure it's right here. Is it here? Subscribe, subscribe. I don't know. Anyways, thank you for listening. Thank you for joining me for this video. It might be long, but it's still pretty amazing. This is Kelly Hauk from Nerdgasmic Adventures signing off. I'll see you next time. Bye.